Hello, and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel, and my guest today, Stephani Grace. Hello.
Hi.
It's really lovely to have you on, and not least of which, the title of your book is irresistible, isn't it? Create Real Happiness, in A to Z. So I like it because it's breaking down the elements of how basically to be a contented spiritual human being. Would you say?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's helping people understand that there's more to happiness than the external, which we maybe have been led to believe.
Yes. And I like it's almost, in some respects, it's almost like a beautiful dictionary, because there's terms that people hear, these little buzzwords like consciousness, etc., that you might hear, but perhaps you've got a sense of it, but you're not really sure what they mean. And there it is, explained beautifully in your book.
Oh, thank you so much. Hope that's my hope, that maybe it's insightful or inspiring to people who are, wanting to grow and find real happiness. Yeah.
So what do you feel, because obviously your book has many of these wonderful qualities described in it, what for you is the core?
The core of real happiness. I believe it is freedom from the conditioned mind. And so, in order to be free from the conditioned mind, we first have to understand that there is a conditioned mind. And I think a lot of times people are walking around believing that they are their conditioned mind. So, part of what I want people to learn from my book is an understanding that they are something beyond their conditioning, and that the voice in their head isn't their truth. And so once people have that understanding, that their true nature, their truth is nothing but love, nothing but divine, then they can understand that this other aspect of them that maybe they've thought was their truth isn't. And so from there, then once people have that understanding, they can begin to be more connected with their truth more often, which is where I believe happiness comes from.
Okay, so as a clinical hypnotherapist, I would phrase things slightly differently, because we want to be careful that we're not making an assumption that everything that we've learned is wrong, because that creates perhaps unnecessary pain and suffering, which we don't want to add to. So we want to make a distinction here between things that you have been given, which cause you inner conflict, such as beliefs about ourselves that are very negative, etc. That's what we want to break free from. And it doesn't mean that everything you ever thought was real is wrong.
Yes, thank you.
That cause a breakdown in a person's psyche, and we don't want that.
Yes, yeah, good. Thank you for I think my description is sort of oversimplified. I think what you're saying is very true, right? It's obviously I believe everything we encounter is actually part of creating us becoming our highest best self. I don't believe anything that we encounter in the world is really a mistake in that sense. I think everything's trying to help us, right? But yeah, in terms of identifying with any negative, conditioning in terms of your self-worth not being, what brings you happiness, or what, is your truth. That's the piece we want to shift. Yeah.
Exactly. It's about being free from fear as well, because
Yeah.
much of negative programming that we pick up some of it, most of it unintentionally given to us, um, creates tension and fear, and we want to be free from that. And that's really very important. So tell us about your journey. How did you get?
Yeah, well, let's see. So I am a person that comes from a challenging, difficult background. So, as a child, I was born into a family that didn't know how to love or care for me. And so, as a result, got some of that negative conditioning about sort of not feeling lovable or worthy, or my needs not being valid. And I think I just have always naturally been a seeker, just kind of wanting to, just within me, this desire to learn about spirituality and to grow as a human. And so that led me to learning about spirituality, which helped me to heal myself. The more I read and learned, the more I was able to heal and learn that who I am, that I am love and worthy of all I desire. And I think from that, healing myself made me feel like I wanted to help and heal others. And so the spirituality, I think, led me to counseling. And and so then I started helping other people, and from there just felt like I wanted to move beyond just one-on-one. And so now I'm in this journey right now of wanting to be able to reach larger populations. I want to try to get out and see if I can reach more people in the world besides just kind of one-on-one. So that's a short version, but that's sort of my journey in a nutshell.
Is, and I think your beginning in some respects was quite extreme.
Yeah, very extreme. Yeah, sometimes I think yes, not everybody has to endure that. What I went through, it was pretty extreme. I feel just very blessed in the sense that I've been able to cultivate the awareness that I have, and have been able to heal and help others heal. And the thing I believe is just that I think it's because I am meant to be doing what I'm doing. And so I think that is sort of why maybe my beginning was so extreme, or the contrast that I endured, so that I could come to know love so profoundly from having such a lack of it.
Indeed, because there was, you were seriously neglected, and some would say also abandoned, at a very early age. And it's not about being judgmental on your parents. It's a fact of life, mental illness, drug addiction, alcohol addiction. It addiction creates a barrier, between ourselves, and us and the rest of the world. And they couldn't possibly, and you said it right at the start, they couldn't give you the love that you would have needed, as a little child. So you talked about finding spirituality. What do you think was the moment where something in you switched?
I think there's a couple things. I mean, one thing that I was fortunate is around the age like 8 or 9, my mother married my stepfather. And so having having a stable figure come into my life was very helpful. But then I had a running coach. So my mother was mentally ill and having a lot of difficulties at home. And so I started doing this, like just kind of like running around my neighborhood, around the block. And this high school running coach, I was only in middle school at the time, he saw me and just sort of took me under his wing. He started having me come to high school practices and running. And I think that relationship was sort of what made the difference for me, him believing in me. I mean, when I first started running, I was really bad. I went to a race, came in second to last. But I think just having this first adult that really took an interest in me and was encouraging me, believing in me, just it just did so much for me that I just wanted to get better, and I ended up becoming a really good runner. But I think just, you know, having that person, and I went on to do research for my master's degree on resiliency, and learned that that's what creates resiliency is really just one positive adult taking an interest in you. And I think really that was what shifted things for me in terms of me being able to get what I needed to be able to be successful in the world, you know.
It's so important, that resilience, and it's so fundamental. For me, looking at things that are important in terms of human beings, it almost screams at me how important they are when I find that it's a cross species need. So I can remember, I think my dog would have been about a year to a year and a half, maybe around 2 years, but he was quite young, and he was pounced on by a German Shepherd, and very shaken up, thankfully unhurt, but very shaken up. And I turned the rest of that walk into something very positive, because I wanted to end on a positive. But I remember speaking to a behaviorist who I'd worked with, you know, in terms of training him, etc. And she said to me, he'll be okay, because what he has is a really big bank of positive experiences. And because he's got that big bank of positive experiences, there's resilience there. So he probably won't fall apart. He'll be all right. And thankfully, you know, he was, and is. But nevertheless, that to me, it was a nice reminder. And the therapist in me went, oh yeah, I know that, because that's what we need as human beings. So this is a fundamental thing that basically all emotional creatures need. They need that bank of positive experiences in order to build resilience. And it was really rather wonderful that you found a coach who was willing to take you under his wing and help you to develop that.
Yes, so lucky, fortunate, really made the difference in my life, I think, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, all of us know, you know, those of us that know that, you know, we can try to do that whenever possible for others, because it's really, you know, it doesn't take much, and it's really only needs to be one person. Yeah.
The very first quality that you describe in your book is acceptance. And I think that kind of ties in nicely with what we're talking about. So tell us about acceptance and why it's important.
Yeah, well, you know, acceptance of what is really our key to freedom, our key to a lack of suffering, because the truth is what is what is. So what's happening is what's happening. What you're feeling is what you're feeling. What you're experiencing is what you're experiencing. So we can resist it, we can hate it, we can want it to go away, but that isn't going to change it. So acceptance is just about, you know, it's really about remaining open and being able to feel your uncomfortable feelings, or be with the feelings that you're experiencing around what's happening, you know. And it's not an easy thing, right? This takes practice, because as humans, we don't really like experiencing negative emotions. So it is something that we have to practice teaching ourselves, but we can know that we can learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. We can learn to be okay with things we don't like or don't want.
I think uncomfortable is possibly a mild way. I would say actually,
Pain.
because we all want to avoid pain. And so this is, of course, one of the things that leads to addiction being such an issue in our society, is that we want to avoid pain. And acceptance that something is painful and may take time to sort out, or may not get sorted out. We may have to find other routes out of this. I think it's a big thing. And it takes another one of your words, courage.
Mm. Yeah.
Tell us about courage.
Yeah. Well, I think courage is about taking steps in spite of your fear, right? So it's like earlier you were talking about fear in one way, you know, whereas like fear can it can keep us from doing the things we want in life, but also we can begin to think of fear um, as sort of in a way, kind of an exciting thing. It's like, oh, I'm pushing up against my comfort zone. This means that I'm about ready to grow in a sense. And so we could know that everybody experiences fear. It's a normal part of life, and nobody does anything wonderful or becomes very successful without it. So we can know that we're in good company, and we can understand that if we want to get where we want to go, we will experience fear, but we can teach ourselves that we can begin to take steps and forward movement in spite of our fear, and that's courage.
That certainly is courage. It's you have to be confronting fear in order to be brave. So, yeah, courage. I think too, you know, the word courage at its core has, you know, the French word cœur, which is heart. And so it's about having that strength in your heart to face that fear. But then we're back to resilience. You need to have some in order to find the courage to do what you need to do to break through that pain. It could be tempting to say, well, you know, that's all very well, but it's easier to avoid all of this. What do you say to that?
Certainly, you can do that if that makes you feel the most comfortable, right? But I suspect most people don't want to stay small. The thing is that most people want to get to the other side of fear, because that's where the bigness is. That's where what it is that they most desire for themselves. So the thing is that when we avoid things, when we stay safe, you know, there is something in that can be comforting and feel good, but also most of our souls, you know, our true selves are seeking something beyond safety, something greater, right? And so if we want to live an emboldened life, the life that we really desire for ourselves, we're going to have to experience fear. And most of us will feel like, you know, if we choose the small, safe route, we're not going to feel fulfilled. But that's a choice. But most people feel grumpy about that.
They do, and more than grumpy, people feel numb. They're going through life, going through the motions, and they feel numb. And that's an entrapment. Then, you know, then they get trapped in lives that they feel have no meaning because they're too afraid to break free. And so this is the reality. And I guess, you know, with your title, Creating Real Happiness, is about challenging all of that and saying, no, okay, this numbness is not good enough.
Yeah.
It may
Yeah.
making me think of that Pink Floyd song, Comfortably Numb. It's, yeah, it may be comfortable to be numb, but really we deserve more than to be numb. We deserve
Yes.
live and to
Yes.
joy, the joy of being alive, to feel connected. One of the things that is really important in terms of feeling alive is creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think I'd be a very wealthy woman for all the times I've heard somebody say, I'm not very creative. How do how do you get past that?
Well, I think it's redefining creativity. I think that a lot of people are walking around thinking that being creative means they can be good at drawing or painting or something like that. But I think that all of us are creative beings and we all need to be creative in some way. And if we begin to understand that creativity is unique to each of us, it's like I think the way I'm most creative is thinking outside the box, and I don't think a lot of people would classify that as creativity, but there's just so many different ways that we can be creative. And so I think it's, first of all, helping people redefine that it's limitless in terms of what it could be. And so it's like then beginning to explore for yourself, well, gosh, how am I creative? What sparks joy in me? What lights me up? What does that look like? And it could be so many different things that creates creativity for each person. But it is important that we each have it and find it for ourselves.
It is important because and as you say, it comes in many different forms, and redefining it is very, very important. So it could be that you're a creative problem solver. It could be that you are a creative cook, a creative gardener. It could be that you enjoy crafts of some kind. And I think one of the sad things that our culture has developed, as it's developed this sense of specializing, it's cut many people off from creativity, because unless you're an artist, you're not going to be doing art. Or unless you're a dancer, you're not, what business have you got dancing? And yet this is the birthright of everyone, because it's the difference between the professional and those who would just do it for expression and joy is that they are developing a skill. It's not about creativity as such. It's the skill that they have devoted themselves to developing. The creativity is open to everyone. And I think it's time that we begin to reclaim that.
Yeah, I love that so much. That's exactly right. I think that so many people would want to be creative just through like dancing in their living room or singing, but feel scared because they feel they're not good enough. And so they just put it away, shut it away. But yeah, I think if we put that out in the world, like, hey, we don't have to be good at it or what society might deem good. So if we enjoy it, we can do it.
Exactly. And that brings me to appreciation, another one of your words. So tell us about appreciation.
Yeah, I love this one because it's sort of just, thinking about how do you want to be in the world, right? It's like we have a choice. We can be somebody who appreciates things that we experience and encounter, or we can be somebody who looks at it in the opposite, right? Somebody who's looking for things that go wrong or looking at what isn't working. And I believe that what we think about, what we focus on is what creates our reality, what creates our perspective. And so it's like if we're looking for ways in the world to appreciate, then we're going to find a lot of good things. We're going to feel good. It's going to be more positive. But if we're focusing on what went wrong in the scenario, then we're not going to feel good, right? We're going to see a lot of things not going right. We're going to not have a lot of connection. And so yeah, it's just kind of focusing on that piece of looking to appreciate rather than looking to be offended. So many people in the world are looking for that opportunity to be offended.
Yes. Yes. And I think if you are constantly looking to be offended, I suspect that puts you into a category of powerlessness, and dare we say victimhood as well. And that is not how to be free. We have to begin to appreciate, and that includes appreciating ourselves. We have to appreciate ourselves and see the good in ourselves, in order to break free. Because I think once we can do that, perhaps we're not so easily offended, and we are certainly more empowered. And that makes it a lot easier to move forward towards happiness.
Yes, yes, definitely. And when we are coming from that place, you know, it allows us to not take other people's behaviors personally. So, like when we know our truth, we know that we're lovable and worthy. We're appreciating who we are and accepting who we are. When we encounter other people who are looking to be offended or who are, you know, not in a good space, or they're not showing up in the way we need or want, we can understand that it's not really about us. It doesn't get to mean anything about us, that it's about them and whatever's going on for them. And so when we're able to not take other people's behavior personally, it frees us up.
So all this positive self-talk is obviously really good. Yet there are times when we let ourselves down. How do we address those times where we let ourselves down by perhaps not being the best version of ourselves? How do
Yeah.
we acknowledge that we were wrong?
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing, all of us are human. And so as long as you're here in a human body, you're not perfect. Nobody is. And we it's not about not making mistakes or making a choice that you don't like. It's about how you treat yourself in the process. I mean, one of my favorite things to say is, what would it be like to be me without judgment? And what that means is that you're allowed to be here being a human without it being right or wrong or good or bad. What, you know, most of us, our intent is really just to be here to become our highest best selves, right? And so we're going to be making choices. Sometimes they go great, sometimes they go bad, sometimes we hurt people's feelings, some, you know, whatever. And it's like it's all part of the process. And so it's like when we can show up for ourselves in the way we would a best friend or a partner or someone we love, that's what it's about. That's what self-love is. It's like, oh, I just snapped at that person and it feels really bad. And so it's, you know, it's kind of like, okay, yep, that wasn't great. So, you know, what was that about? What do you need to do? So it's like, rather than beating yourself up, because that's not going to change anything, it's about showing up for yourself in the way that, you know, can help you to move forward or feel better, you know.
Exactly. And that's the thing, isn't it? Because people are often afraid that by being very positive, that they are suddenly going to unleash some monster that's inside of them, that's being chained up by the constant vigilance of judgment and criticism. And it's actually the way around, because if you are constantly being self-critical, it makes you afraid of being criticized. It makes you much more likely to take things very, very personally, and much more likely to do all those things that you wanted to avoid doing in the first place. Whereas if we treat ourselves with some kindness and are able to forgive ourselves, and you said it, the classic would be hurting somebody else's feelings or being snappy or grumpy, and you think, oh, I shouldn't have done that, I wish I hadn't done that. Yep, okay, so let's work through that, and what are you going to do about it? You didn't handle that very well. Okay, what's the plan? What's the plan for what are we going to do better next time? And can we make amends? Can we make amends? So I think
Yeah.
that's a really important thing, because what we're talking about is a process of growth, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. And one of the things I also like to say is that we can always choose again, right? I mean, in our society, I feel like often like we feel like once we've made a choice or we've done something, like that's it. But really, we can always choose again. We can choose to go talk to somebody differently. We can choose a different choice, a different career, a different partner, a different whatever. We're allowed to choose again. So if we do something and we don't like how we handled it, we can go back and do it differently, you know, whatever that looks like.
Another very important word that you have as a quality for happiness is dignity.
Mm, yeah, yeah,
Dignity.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important, because it's really seeing each other, isn't it? It's about not walking by people on the street and averting your eyes. It's about, looking at each other and lifting each other up. It's about reminding each other about who we truly are at our core. And I think that's what dignity is about, is honoring the divinity in each of us and remembering that we are actually all connected and that we are all the same, really, even though we're very different, you know?
And that to me is about respect. And respect is about holding everything as sacred, holding life as sacred. And if you can hold life as sacred, then it means that you remember that every human being is sacred. And that is going to mean that your aim will always be to behave respectfully, to give somebody their dignity, but equally to have your own sense of dignity too.
Yes, yes, and that it's actually good point, because it's most important for us, right? Keeping your word to yourself. I mean, that's the thing that we forget about, but it's so important that we honor ourselves and have dignity for ourselves, and that's really about keeping our word to ourselves. And it's so easy. We often think, oh well, it's okay if I said I'm not going to do this, it's just me. But you're the one who, how can you trust yourself, your own intuition, if you're not respecting yourself or honoring yourself, right? So it is most important that we keep our word to ourselves. And one of my favorite quotes that I have hanging in my bathroom is that self-discipline is like the strongest act of self-love. It's about honoring and respecting yourself.
That makes me think about commitment as well, because I do come across many people who flirt with spiritual ideals and who yearn, find a more spiritual way of being. But it's courage and commitment, because it does require a kind of rigor, and you use the word self-discipline, to think about what's happening at a deeper level. And sometimes, you just want to switch off, and that's okay. But it does require us to think and to be committed to thinking and questioning, and that's really important.
Yeah, it is. And one of the things, I think it's another way that people often beat themselves up, is because like we have these expectations. And so people feel like, oh, if I'm going to be spiritual, I have to do all these things. If I'm going to be fit, I have to do this. If I'm going to be sober, I have to do this. And so it's like, I think what ends up happening is people feel overwhelmed by the sheer, like, greatness of their expectations. And what I've found is that reason why people often aren't committed or avoid is because their expectations are too much. And so I think for each of us, it's like remembering we're unique and finding like, what are the small steps that you can take? Like, how can we break it down so it doesn't feel threatening or too big or scary? Just one little small, maybe add one small thing that helps you to move toward your spiritual goals or your exercise, rather than like, I have to meditate every day for 40 minutes if I'm going to be spiritual.
No, that's right, because it's more a way of being and an attitude, and it comes back to the notion of dignity and holding everything as sacred. That's it. If you've got that, it changes everything. And it's when you have that in mind, and you are committed to living in that way, you're not going to be able to do it every second of every day because you're human. But then if you are committed to that, you will also forgive yourself in times of weakness. And that's in itself an exercise, and of that commitment. So So I think we need to always remember that it begins with the attitude. Everything else comes in small increments, you know,
Yeah.
and and at that point, because it comes in small increments, it gets easier. But you need to have that intention, and then you need to be committed to that to begin with. And then everything comes from that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you did a lovely job of describing sort of the middle way, balance, you know? That's what it's about. It's not getting caught in this pendulum of like one extreme or the other. It's about learning that some, you know, sometimes we're good, sometimes, you know, it's like finding where that balance is, finding the middle way, you know?
It's a journey for all of us. And whether you are beginning your exploration of a different way of being, or whether you're in the middle, wherever you are on this journey, I think this book, Creating Real Happiness, A to Z, is a great place to go, because either it's a place to start or a place to go to be reminded of things that perhaps need refreshing. So thank you very, very much, Stephanie, for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such an honor to come and chat with you. And I always enjoy just, you know, talking about the things I'm very passionate about with like-minded individuals. It's just so fun. It's the best part about having written this book.
Isn't it? I love that too. So if people wanted to find out more about you and your work, where could they go? I'll be putting a link to the book on the description box. But if they wanted to contact you, how do they do that?
Yeah, so I have a website, and my name Stephanie doesn't have an E on the end. It's Stephani, and my last name Grace. Grace. So stephanigrace.com is my website, and I have pretty much everything available on there. And also, I'm very active on Instagram. I do a mindful minute most days and a little inspirational posts for people, and you can also find that by searching for Stephani Grace without an E.
Wonderful, thank you. All of that I will have on the description box. Thank you all for watching, and do remember that there is a creativity workshop that I'm holding at the Harry Edwards Healing Sanctuary coming up in July. And next time, I will be speaking to a wonderful herbalist about working with plants and their spirits. Until then, goodbye.